Okay, so hi everybody. Welcome to this final and bonus session for the World Workplace Wellbeing Online Summit. And this is a conversation with Google's head of wellness. And the session's being run by Rachael Riggs, who's an amazing member of our initiative. Rachael, for 25 years, she's had this passion for creating holistic and sustainable event experiences, motivating people to be the best versions of themselves while caring for the environment. As General Manager, Environmental Strategy, and subject matter expert on wellbeing design, Rachael is responsible for Merit's corporate sustainability reporting and compliance. Additionally, Riggs Co. created a carbon footprint measurement tool that measures the footprint of an event. With this tool, Riggs works with clients to provide design insights to lessen the impact of an event. Riggs also works with clients to design event experiences that care for the whole person so they can perform at their peak. I've got to tell you, Rachel's an incredible person, full of passion, so much skill and so much wisdom. And if you want to read more about her, certainly check in on our event website. And so I'd like to hand over to Rachael, and she can introduce her incredible guest who's doing amazing work at Google. And over to you guys.
Thanks, John. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I appreciate it. I am honored to be here because of John, and then honored to have our guest, Megan. Megan, please share a little bit about you and what John read my bio. Let's hear your bio from you yourself.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me. It's always such a pleasure to hang out with you and spend time with you and chat about things that I know we're both very passionate about in the world. First, I will clarify that I am not Google's head of wellness. I'm not sure that role exists, but there is a lot of intersectionality between what I do, which is lead strategy for the global events team, and how we think about caring for Googlers, caring for guests when we're bringing them together in event environments. We do talk a lot about resilience, designing for human flourishing across all of our design disciplines. But my core job is focused on event and experience design. And part of that job is leading the Google Experience Institute, which is an interdisciplinary community of designers, not just focused on events, but also on the built environment and technology and other aspects of things that human beings touch and interact with every day. And it really is an internal and external community focused on innovating a future for human experience, a future that leaves people better than we found them, that creates opportunities for well-being and restoration, and really aims to cultivate human flourishing. So we really try to push the boundaries of traditional design, delivery, and even how we think about assessment and return on those decisions and investments. So I'm super excited to be here and to have this conversation.
Thank you. So exciting. And I just love the work you're doing. But let me ask you before we get started into the work now, what led you here?
Well, I like to say all the time that I think ending up in the events industry is sort of like the wand from Harry Potter. Like, it chooses you. Like, so many people I meet, it's just that because of who they were, they landed in an event job and fell in love with it. And that's very much my story and journey. I started my first big girl job inside of a tech company, but I was in inside sales. And so I was in like a call center environment and hated sales, was terrible at sales, but really great at building relationships with people and understanding both from like a consumer perspective, but also behavioral perspective, what would resonate with people. And so I went to my manager at the time and was like, hey, like, I'm really bad at like closing sales, but I'm really good at content development and regional sales meetings and customer experience. So can I maybe do some of that and less of this? And that's how I got into events, and I imprinted on my heart and my life. And I was like, this is 100% what I'm supposed to be doing. So yeah, I like feel very lucky that I sort of fell into it, but it chose me. It wasn't like something that I set out.
Yeah. And it's really interesting how that industry chooses you and what you choose to do with it, right? I think that there's so much, and what you have done and what you've chosen to do with this is quite extraordinary, in my opinion. How did you get to Google?
Also not a terribly exciting story, but I think one that really demonstrates the shoot your shot mentality. So I was working for an agency at the time, freelancing, and I had my son, went on maternity leave, and can look back now and know that I was like fully in postpartum depression, but started to really like agonize over money and providing for him, and like, am I doing enough in the world? You know, like existential crisis after you have a child, which I don't think we talk about enough
I
as
agree.
moms, especially working moms. But yeah, I got a wild hair and was like, I need to be doing something bigger in the world. Like I want to be more for him. I want to be able to provide more for him, and totally put an application in for the Google job on a lark, thinking I will never even get an interview for this job. I am totally unqualified on paper for this job. And here I am. So like, I don't know anybody at Google. I wasn't referred. I'm not Ivy League educated. I literally repel technology, and I work for a technology company, but something about, I think maybe the fresh perspective and the relationships that I was able to build through the interview process, I landed here. And it's been a really cool story arc and journey at Google, because what I was hired to do is actually really not what I'm doing now. I was hired to sort of do business relationships and like business partnering with the different PAs. And I did that, but it led me to understand how strategy needed to evolve, how we needed a theoretical reframing of like how we bring people together, and the powerful tool that it can be for business while still doing good in the world. And so it led me down this path to do even bigger things than I could have ever imagined. I feel very fortunate.
Well, it's impressive what you've done. Can you share a little bit about Google XI and tell us the story of it, and then let's get into the new project too.
Yeah, of course.
So start with Google XI.
So it started during the pandemic. So 2020, perfect time to start to do innovation work, right? Like what? Very unlikely time for something like this to sort of seed and grow, but we started to do research, and there were 4 of us, I think, cross-functionally focused on experience design, environmental design, and learning and development design inside our people ops organization. And we were just trying to understand what people would want, expect, need, what their appetites would be when we started to regather post-pandemic. And the research set us on a journey, we pushed our boat into the water and went in a completely different direction than we ever could have imagined, because what we learned from the research and what we heard from all of the focus groups that we held over the course of 2 years while we were in lockdown was that there were things that we had been doing for a really long time that were designing a lot of people out of the environments and the programming and the experiences and the activations that we were delivering. And it was enlightening. Sure. So where I really thought the work would take us down a path of technology development or having better hybrid meeting tools, it's all human centric. It's so heart centered, the work that we're doing. And it's all about what are the blockers that we have in our industries across design disciplines that prevent us from doing the good work, the right work of helping people be the best they can be in any given environment. And that's really how the new project came to be. Like some of the most common themes in the early days of research and focus grouping was, well, I don't go to events because they're so hard for me. I get sensory overwhelm, and networking. I would rather eat glass than go to happy hour with like a bunch of strangers, right? Like I get overscheduled and overwhelmed, and I can't get out of bed for 2 days after an event. I get so much anticipatory anxiety before I go to an event that 9 times out of 10 I cancel. And now we have all these amazing statistics and data to support why this matters. But the new project was our attempt at reflecting what we heard around hidden disabilities, reflecting what we heard around these really powerful experiences, and empowering event professionals and experience designers to do something about it. So it's very like practical, a lot of the resources that we have, but it's also a lot of storytelling around things we can't see, challenges that we can't observe, and strengths that are largely getting untapped right now because these communities aren't coming to our events.
Right, exactly. And we're talking about the neurodivergent and neuroinclusion, and that's what I have been so passionate about through my well-being career, and now with sustainability on it is, how do we create space for all? And how do we make it inviting for people to show up and leave feeling well, feeling motivated, feeling happy, and feeling like they can be the best that they can be? And that was how we designed Wellbeing into events. And you've taken it and it's just gone with that thought and that thinking is how do we make it inclusive? And so can you talk about how you did that? Like, what did you do once we started coming back from isolation, for lack of a better word?
Yeah. Well, we still did a lot of listening and we did a lot of piloting based on what we had already heard. And what's so amazing about asking questions that can be uncomfortable is that it creates an open door and a vulnerability that you will learn more than you ever expected to learn. And so, neurodivergent people, and, for anyone who might be new to that, we're talking about like cognitive functioning and processing apart from what is considered typical or neurotypical. So people on the autism spectrum, ADHD, OCD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, which is like the math version of dyslexia. So there's, about 25% conservative estimate of the global population that is neurodivergent in some way. More and more, the social justice movement is acknowledging mental health conditions, especially those that are chronic, as a form of neurodivergence. So we're talking about a lot of people. Some estimate up to 40% of the global population having sort of these silent cognitive learning, processing challenges. So the new project really was to name that, speak truth to it, share some of those stories, and then also help event professionals do something with that new knowledge, right? So there are a lot of resources and best practices. There's a checklist that's weighted so that you can sort of value engineer out, prioritize things, and then value engineer out what maybe you can't make happen in a really thoughtful way. But it's been the most fulfilling work I've ever done. And I'm just so proud to be able to share it with the industry openly. And we're not proprietary about any of it. And I love that.
Oh, what you did at IMEX America last year, which is an event industry trade show and at conference that's held in October, was mind-blowing. And just how you embraced all of the diversity and the and inclusion was just truly something that I have never seen before in an event. And I just would love for you to share a little bit about how it showed up every day at the event.
Yeah. Well, I think we in some ways we took it to extremes at IMEX. One, because they're incredible partners and they're sort of like, come in and do weird stuff. We don't care. And in other ways, because we really wanted to demonstrate what a counterpoint to traditional environments like that can look like, right? So at IMEX, it's a trade show floor. It's busy. It's action-packed. You're back to back. You're on all the time. And so we wanted the XI collaboratory and the content we offered there to be a counterbalance and a counterpoint to that in a lot of ways. And we wanted to offer programming that created some moments of digestion, processing, regulation, restoration to make all the other parts of it much easier and more delightful. And I love that we heard from so many people like this feels like home on the trade show floor. This is like a really safe space for us. And Merrick's actually an awesome partner. They let us bring in a interfaith reverend to do
awesome.
Ritual on the trade show floor. We had dance church on the trade show floor, and it was like one of the most joyful things I've ever seen. So yeah, like we're coming back. We now strategically partner with IMEX every year. So we're going to be bringing some more fun, weird things to the trade show floor in Vegas. But so much of our programming is about making sure we're giving people what they need to stay engaged and stay present and stay well in our event environment so that we can, really meaningfully connect with them and give them something. And that they're not leaving so depleted that they don't want to come back again, or that it takes them 3 days to recover. Right. But thank you for that acknowledgement. And thank you for the partnership also. That was so fun.
You're welcome. It's so fun. It's so exciting to see. A little bit of history here is, so I wanted to run a corporate fitness center when I was in college, and I worked for the Association for Fitness and Business, and I worked for a couple of different organizations throughout the early part of my career, but I mostly stayed in the events industry. But I always wanted my two professional loves to come together, and you're the person that's really bringing it together. Merritt's has given me this runway to bring the design concept into it, but I'd love to see how you're really making it happen, because we want, and we did 3 research studies as well before the pandemic on, I was at a trade show and I was noticing the behavior of the event, of the attendees being generational. And the younger generation wanted to keep up their workouts. They wanted to maintain the good health and eating, and maintain their schedule and really balance their lives while they're attending an event. Whereas the older generation was looking at coming in, hitting the ground hard, 7 to 7, going out to all hours and doing that 3 days a week or 4 days a week of the week, and then getting on the plane and going home exhausted. And it was very interesting to watch the two different generations at that time looking at a meeting and their experience so differently. So we studied that, and we were very, very intrigued by the findings. And then I got my job as the well-being leader at Merritt's to design events differently based on our 5 dimensions of well-being, which are personal, social, career, financial, and environmental. And then I started my job on March 2nd of 2020. So it kind of just, where you guys, I mean, it's just
great timing, awesome timing. Yeah,
perfect, right? So when we came back, we really focused on, and we could have face-to-face, we really focused on that personal well-being, that first dimension of 5 dimensions of well-being. And the personal well-being is really encompassing the physical, the intellectual, the mental, and the spiritual health of a person. And it's really important that people understand that those 4 components of your personal well-being are really, really looked after properly. And I commend you for, you're really leaning into personal well-being, and that is really important for the longevity of people being able to attend events because of all the different reasons of diversity that we have. One of the things that it's really interesting that I have a daughter that has bipolar, and she said to me yesterday, Mom, I don't understand why there's so much a lack of knowledge on bipolar. And she's done a great job of managing her bipolar, and she's a happy, productive human. It's taken her a lot of work, but she's like, there is not a lot of people out there that are talking about that. And I said, honey, it's like when I was young, people didn't talk about money with your parents, or you didn't talk about, some taboo topics, and we're still getting out of that phase of taboo topics. And I think the new project and what you guys are doing is really putting some conversation out there that makes it really valuable for people to grow and learn and understand one another. And so, having said all of that, can you talk about the new project and what you're doing in terms of communication and educating on the neurodiversity and how that works, and how that conversation happens? Because I think a lot of people are interested in that.
Yeah. Well, I think neurodiversity was a relatively untalked about topic. It wasn't a conversation we were having before we, launched the new project in 2022, not in a meaningful way, not in very public forums, not from a keynote stage, right? Like there've always been neurodivergent people in our industry.
Always.
We weren't talking about it in a meaningful way, and we weren't including it as a key ingredient in events. And I think when we're looking at the macro statistics, when we're looking at the rates of chronic mental health conditions, and when we're looking at the diagnostic rates of neurodivergence, this is a large population. This is a large part of all of our communities, all of our workforces, all of our teams. We're interacting with these folks every single day, and they've largely been suffering in silence and accommodating themselves. And I think at some point, and I don't know if it was like the experience economy talk or how we got to this sort of default state of we have to make it flashy and bright and loud and action packed, and we can't give them a minute of respite or we're going to lose them. That it broke a lot of people. And I think the pandemic was this moment of like collective reckoning and reflection, and it deepened our understanding, I think, for all of us, of what we needed. I know I like didn't know I was an introvert. I can be extroverted, but in my heart of hearts, I'm an introverted person. I didn't recognize that until the pandemic. As a result of the new project work, I've gotten an autism diagnosis in my 40s. And I've been diagnosed with multiple things over the years, anxiety disorder. I've been told I'm depressed. And I knew that like, that doesn't feel right, but you know, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I think neurodiversity it is all of us. It's neurotypical people and neurodivergent people. We all have a lot of shared experience, regardless of like our cognitive functioning style. We use stars as our branding on the new project because we like to say like no two minds are alike, just like no two stars are alike. All stars are beautiful. All stars are right. Like but they're all different, right? And I think we have to honor that. But the new project came to be because we knew we needed to figure this out as an industry. We knew based on the data that it was impacting our business and it was impacting our ability to strategically serve the audiences that we're supposed to serve. And so in so many ways, this was very heart-centered work, and it was work that has given us a lot of purpose and meaning, but it is also very pragmatic work, and it is very good strategic work. So I don't know if that gets to your question, but that's sort of, you know, why we felt it was important work to do, and why we like took it to one of the biggest industry stages in the world and launched it in IMEX, because I was like, we need critical mass around this. So yeah, and it's so funny, Rach, and I know you and I have talked about this before, but every time I take this topic somewhere and present on it or host a workshop or do a certification training or whatever it might be, I have multiple people come up to me after the session, and I'm sure you experience the same thing talking about well-being, mental health, but people are like, I'm going through my own evaluation process right now, or, oh my God, I see myself reflected in so much of what you said. I need that in my life. Or my child is like, this is something that touches almost everyone. And it just thrills me to be able to broaden the conversation and invite more people into it. So thank you for hosting this today.
Gosh. You're welcome. You're welcome. It's funny. It's amazing. And I have a similar story. I worked for a pharmaceutical company back in the day. And I was on the launch team of the drug Ambien, which is a sleep medicine, right? And my job, and this was early in my career, was go around the country with sleep doctors and talk about the benefits of quality sleep. And then the pharmaceutical reps would go in and talk about the new drug. Anyway, the point of my story is that sleep, nobody talked about, right? They just didn't talk about it. And so I would have these seminars, not webinars, there was no technology back then, but that we would have these seminars in these campuses talking about sleep wellness. And people, it was like that they were coming out from under the ground to talk about a topic that they didn't want to talk about. And it was, but they knew they needed help. They needed to understand about sleep hygiene, about sleep, atmospheres and things like that. And it was so heartwarming, as you said, to see the change in people, because we did these workshops, like an introductory, a 30-day and a 60 and a 90-day. And then they come back and you could see their faces just change. They're happier, they're well rested. So I'm sure what you're experiencing is something very similar to what I experienced back then, just to open that conversation and to have that and to see the change over time. I'm excited for you to go back to IMEX this year and see what you're going to be engaging and how you're going to engage with people, because I think you're going to be over excited about what the changes you've made, and people will come up to you. I'm still blown away by that experience for me. So I'm excited for you in that.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to touch on something that you said, the sleep thing. Like, we're in a moment where we, as people who deliver spaces and experiences for people, have to acknowledge that there are limitations to being a human. Hustle culture, we have to let it go, right? Like this idea of being always on and always up, that we have to let that go. And I think there's a lot of evolution with language and just mindset and theory that has to happen in order for the practices to get to the place they need to be. But yeah, I think that for such a long time, there's been this mindset that, I'll sleep when I'm dead, or like I have to be the first in and last out. And like, this is fake news. We are actually our optimal selves. We can meet our potential and self-actualize when we acknowledge that, just like there are, different dietary restrictions or different belief systems, there are also different ways of thinking and processing. And it is critical for us to acknowledge all of those things and consider them in our design. And once we do that, everybody is going to have a much better time at our events.
Oh my gosh, totally. And even in the workplace, right? When you take this type of thinking in the workplace and you design a workplace well-being experience, or just even how you're bringing your team back to the office. Because I know there's a struggle right there that people, leaders want their employees to be in the office, and employees are really enjoying working from home. So what is that balance? And what is that where you can feel happy, healthy, and balanced, but you can also meet your corporate objectives of your leadership, right? And so I think we're at a really pivotal point in business, in my opinion, to that balance of well-being and the workplace, and well-being and events. I think it's super exciting, and I'm so excited to see where it's going. So can you tell me a little bit about Google Xi and how it shows up within Google, and what's the workplace environment that you're experiencing, and how you're seeing your Googlers benefit from this?
Yeah, well, what you just said is actually a great segue into this question. So my team actually sits under workplace experience, and in our corporate real estate group. And it's like most events teams either sit within marketing or sort of like the human resources functions. We're in real estate and workplace experience. So it's a really interesting vantage point and perspective, and I think has heavily influenced the XI work. Or whereas we started talking about events and sort of time-bound curated experience, we're now seeing that so many of these topics translate perfectly, and there's a lot of urgency to like also address this in a workplace environment, and how we show up with our teams, leadership. And so we are, using a lot of the XI work for not just the evolution of how we think about gathering, but also how we think about the future of work and workplace. We are using a lot of the new project tactics in our marketing tent poles, for example. So if you come to IO, or if you come to Google Marketing Live, you'll see sensory kits and you'll see resilient spaces. And like, that is a best practice now. We're building those spaces into our global portfolio for our employees. So we acknowledge we don't just want it to be something that's available at an event. We want it to be something that's available every day, because we want the best of you every day, and we want you to feel your best every day. I feel very lucky, and a lot of times, I'm almost embarrassed to talk about some of what's happening, because I know not every organization is as progressive or as privileged as Google. Like, I can speak truth to that very candidly. But some of this stuff is low barrier to entry, and it's very low cost. It's the way we communicate with one another. It's the way that we think about being flexible with one another based on where people are and what they need and how they work and how they show up. Providing agency and autonomy where we can, curating choices that create like these exciting moments, but also create moments for people to process and integrate what they just experienced so that they can retain it. So, I think these are things that are manifesting in a lot of different ways in a lot of different parts of Google, both events and experiences, the learning and development world, but also just how we think about the future of work.
Right, exactly. I think the future of work, it's so interesting, because we're about ready to have a big changeover in the next 10 years of leadership and young people coming up. And I think that it's just going to be very, very different, in my opinion. I can't put the nail on the head exactly how, we've seen what can happen by a global pandemic. What's going to happen, future forward is really interesting. And I think it's exciting. And in my opinion, I think the work that you're doing is really leading that and helping us be very in tune with what the future is going to be. When you talk about, and I know this is minute, but talk about your neurodivergent kit that you just shared about. What does that look like for you, or for what you do for Google?
Yeah, so the sensory kit was developed because,
thank you.
Yeah, very early on in sort of conversations around how we could make environments more friendly for neurodivergent people based on sensory processing differences, the need for more optionality, and the need for more predictability and preparation in those spaces. We acknowledge, like, in some of these environments, we can't control the lighting, or we can't control how sound carries. We can't control the scent, because there's a leader somewhere who loves the smell of lavender, and it's just, whatever it might be. And I think that's the case for all of us, right? In the events profession, like, sometimes we're very hamstrung and limited by the environments that we have to use. And so the sensory kits were born from that. So what could we have on hand that makes an environment that may not be optimal for neurodivergent people more tolerable, more friendly, more caring? And so this sensory kit is all about helping people regulate the input that is coming in and filter out things that are maybe unwanted so that they can focus on the things that are. So some of the things that are included there are like sound filtering headphones. We partner with a company called Loop. Very proud to partner with them. They're awesome. Product's great, but they're discrete earbuds that filter sound. So they don't remove you from the experience, but they make the ambient noise a little more tolerable so that you can actually focus on a conversation or the content or whatever it might be. A lot of autistic people in particular are taking in a lot more sensory input than the average neurotypical brain. So there's a recent statistic that came out that said most autistic people are taking in 30 to 40% more information in any given moment than a neurotypical person. And that could be the buzzing of a fluorescent light that isn't perceptible to other people, or someone breathing 4 seats down. Like, there is a heightened sensitivity to sensory input in an autistic brain. And so it's things that help mitigate that: light filtering glasses, sound filtering headphones, fidget toys. So a lot of times stimming is a coping mechanism. It's a regulation mechanism. So giving them something that helps them with that function, that activity. A lot of like affirming stickers. So like, neurodivergent is the future, like very, we see you, we love you, we consider you. We have coloring books, like, I think sensory tools range. So we try to create a lot of different options, but we package them into a kit and we give them away at registration. We have them available at all times so people can go and get things that are helpful to them depending on their particular needs.
I love that. That's really, really fun. One of the things that we've done at our events is do a care station as well, which has nothing to do with neurodivergency, but it's that sign that you care for people, that you're thinking about their personal needs while they're attending your event. And I think that to me is something that we as event professionals don't always think about, because we're thinking about the mass, and we got to get down to the person. It's got to be at the personal level to keep having people come back to your events. So that's awesome. A couple other questions. How do you provide in your workplace culture? How do you provide communication on these things? Is it promoted internally? How is it communicated?
So we've predominantly owned our own sort of marketing channels. But yeah, like we provide the sensory kits on the merchandise store. So they're not just for events. We stock them at all of our event centers so that they're readily available. But you can also, as a Googler sitting somewhere who just may have challenges in the office, order one for yourself at a significantly discounted rate. The resilience rooms we're just building into the environment so that they're there. So like, we've sort of created principles and standards for those spaces, and we're actually launching our very first ground up sort of purpose-built resilient space here in Atlanta, attached to our event hub here very soon. I'm so proud of that. So we're just implementing and then over communicating about what's available. I think one really important thing that comes up a lot when people ask me, like, what's one of the most meaningful things you can do? It's in registration comms or in comms where you're inviting people into a space, whatever it may look like, whatever use case it may be, outlining the accommodations that you've already thought of and saying, here's what we've planned for. What above and beyond this might be helpful to you, or what could we do to make sure that you have a phenomenal experience and feel seen, reflected, considered in this event, in this environment. But I've found, we've done some A/B testing, and I found that when you already list the things that you've planned for and are doing, the information you get back to the second part of that question are so much more meaningful, because they know you're walking the talk. They know you care, and that you're far more likely to actually do the thing that they need done on their behalf. And so such a hack for RegComs and getting back meaningful, actionable ideas and things from your community.
And when your A/B testing group, when you've asked that question after you communicate and you ask, is there anything else? Do you get anything back? Have you ever gotten anything back?
Almost every time.
Really?
Almost every time. And we always, like, if someone self-identifies, and disclosure is important. I'm sure you talk about this all the time in your work too. But if someone does disclose, we always follow up. Hey, thank you so much for sharing your experience. How did we do? What could we have done better? What more could we have done? So many of the tactics that you'll see in the new project, we got from that exact conversation, because it's not something we would have thought of on our own. We don't have the lived experience that would help us know why that's helpful. Yeah.
And so is the new project open to anybody?
It is. It was quite a journey, many conversations to make that externally available. But I think it was important to our leadership, seeing the impacts of that internally, to also try to create as much impact externally as we can. So it's all free. It's all available externally. It's just thenewproject.com. And new is spelled NEU. It's short for Neuroinclusion. There's a downloadable resource guide. There's also a checklist that we use for a lot of our events. There's guidance around sensory spaces and resilient spaces. We also point to a lot of other partners that we've worked with to share the love. So, highly encourage you to check it out. And use, anything that makes sense for you and your work.
I love that. And I'm saying that because I want people in the audience to understand that, because it's pretty phenomenal work, and you're just handing it to people to take and learn, which is so great. And it's so meaningful to so many people. So congratulations on that. So you live in Atlanta, and we have a couple more minutes left. Couple more minutes. You live in Atlanta, you have a little boy. Is he a future Googler?
Great question. I think he identifies as a dinosaur. So we're going to see what direction he goes in. I don't know if there are any dinosaur jobs at Google right now, but I don't know. I can absolutely see him being in a creative field. Otis, my son, is also autistic. He was diagnosed at age 3 and was a big influence on all of this work too. I would be lying if I said that advocating for my kid wasn't a big part of all this, but yeah, we'll see. I could see music in his future. I could see theater in his future. We'll see.
So fun. That's awesome. I have another daughter that's getting ready to go. She's an intern in the events industry this summer, and in a hotel, and it's just so funny to watch them grow up. So it's very cool. Well, Megan, I love talking about your world and your child, Otis. I love his name. It's just awesome to spend some time with you and share some stories. And
well, I just want to follow up with your comments to say that I love you and the work that you're doing.
Thank you,
thank you for always connecting the dots for us and our work. And if anybody who is listening now or listens to this wants to know more, wants to get involved in the XI work, it is an open community. We have mostly external members. Find me on LinkedIn. My door is always open. I really am so grateful for every person who is also passionate about this work and this topic that I meet. So don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you. Well, it's been a true pleasure. And I know that it's a Friday and a lot of people want to go enjoy their weekend. So thank you very, very much. And this will be recorded. It is being recorded, and we'll share it on the GWI website. And just thank you very much, Megan. You're a gem, and you're changing the world, my friend. I'm so proud of you.
My absolute pleasure. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.